Our guest is UNM Distinguished Professor of Epidemiology at the UNM Cancer Center. Dr. Marianne Berwick is here. She has a PhD in the program, and welcome to the Morning Brew. As you can see, we have a lot of fun.
Yes, yes, and I'm glad you do.
Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So the first thing I thought of, I have to say, is the first time I thought about this was, you've probably heard the joke, your epidermis is showing.
No, I haven't.
Well, fill her in. Right?
Tell me more.
When I was younger, people would always try to use that joke, and I'm like, I know that, it's your skin. But of course, they couldn't fool you on that one.
Oh, no.
She's not going to run back to the office and tell that one, I don't think.
Oh, yes, I am.
She
You are?
Oh, yeah.
She'll use that.
We need some humor.
Fantastic.
But let's get serious.
Sure. Phil, first of all, fill us in on your work at the UNM Cancer Center, what you do there.
Sure. Well, I study melanoma skin cancer, which has very high rates, as you know, in New Mexico.
Sure.
And I've been studying it for about 25 years, starting in Connecticut, moving to New York, and now in this lovely state. And we have an international study that has 4 countries, Australia, Italy, Canada, and the United States. And we've been studying one group of people for 15 years. And so the results that I would like to talk about come from that study. We have 3,500 people enrolled in the study.
Oh, wow. So what has come out of this study so far?
Well, lots has come out, but the thing that we're excited about and interested in right now is the fact that when you look at people who have only one melanoma compared to people who have 2 or more melanomas, we find that people who have 2 or more melanomas survive the same way as people with 1 melanoma.
Oh.
And that's important because many people get a 2nd or 3rd melanoma, and so I think it's scary, and they don't need to feel as frightened after our research, I think.
Right.
So is it, if you've had 1 melanoma, are the odds very, very high that you're going to get a 2nd, perhaps 3rd?
Yeah, fairly high, fairly high. It's not for certain at all, but probably the same factors that caused the first melanoma are still at work to lead to the 2nd melanoma.
So the research that you did discovered something about the thickness of the tumor.
It did, yes.
And that was relative to some other factors, survivability and and the ability to cure these tumors. Talk about what that research found.
All right. Well, so if the thicker your tumor, then the poorer your survival, the more likely you are to die from melanoma. The good news is that about 70% of melanoma tumors are quite thin, less than 1 millimeter in thickness. But we found that people who have 2 melanomas, even though they have the same thickness of tumor as people with 1 melanoma, have a little bit higher chance to survive than people with with 1 melanoma. So it's a little confusing, but what it means basically is even though you have a serious melanoma, you're a little bit better off if you've had 2.
Right. And of course, the sun causes skin cancer.
Yes.
But I mean, are there anything that you found that really were more of, like, you know, okay, not wearing SPF 20 or not sunbathing too much, or did you find any big causes for what causes skin cancer?
Well, obviously it is unprotected sun exposure. So people who don't wear sunscreen, people who don't wear hats and you can wear long sleeves. It can be very comfortable. People in tropical countries often wear long clothes. And so really it's the unprotected blast of sun exposure that you get on weekends. Okay. So if you're indoors all week and then you go out boating or fishing and forget to wear your hat or put on sunscreen, then you're at much higher risk.
Right.
And then people who live in our climate, people who live at a low latitude here, Australia, we're at higher risk because the sun is much stronger here.
Dr. Berwick, when doctors, physicians find out about the results of this study, what can they do with that information?
Well, they can simply educate their patients. They can assure patients who are getting a series of melanomas that they're not at higher risk for dying from melanoma. They can also promote skin self-examination, being very aware of your skin, having a partner check your back, and going to see a dermatologist as soon as possible if you have an unusual mark that has been developing. So that's very important.
And when you say an unusual mark, a lot of people will see moles or something, they don't think much about it. But what is the difference between like a mole and something that might be suspect?
Well, a mole is usually very regular in outline, whereas a skin cancer is often not, unless you have a basal cell or a squamous cell. Those are fairly regular, and they tend not to kill you, but they can be disfiguring. So if you have anything that's growing quickly, it's a good idea to see somebody about it.
Can skin cancer be genetic in any way?
Very good question. Absolutely. And we're looking at the genetics factors that interact with sun exposure. So, for example, I tan very easily, and I expect I won't get skin cancer, but people who don't tan easily and people who have light eyes or light skin, they're much more at risk. And those are genetic factors. Pigmentation is genetic. And then there are other factors too that have to do with your DNA repair capacity and some other things that we're finding out that are very important in risk.
I've seen a rising number of people, younger people, getting skin cancer. Many because they use tanning beds, and
good point.
looks good to be tan or whatever. But that can increase your chances of getting skin cancer,
Interestingly,
right?
yes, absolutely. We've just done a study in Minnesota where people tend to use tanning beds quite a bit because of the harsh, long winters. And we do find that people who use tanning beds have a higher risk than simply people who have been out in the sun quite a bit. So tanning beds have something, we're not sure exactly what it is, whether it's the combination of rays or the way people use them, but they do put you at high risk for all kinds of skin cancer.
I went through this when I was young. I battled acne back in the days when you have acne, but living where I lived, I noticed that when I got in the sun, the acne went away.
Yes.
I'm wondering if that's going to catch up with me in my later years.
Well, there's some indication that it won't,
Good.
actually.
Good,
and I should say that there are some good things about sun.
Oh, of course, vitamin D. And all
right,
that
and
good
it seems to lower blood pressure. So a little sun is good, but too much is not.
And a lot of easy ways you can prevent skin cancer. So like SPF.
Right.
Now I've heard sometimes the SPF 20 isn't enough.
Actually, SPF 30 is what we recommend.
Okay.
15 is where it usually starts. But if you put it on before you go out and then reapply it about an hour later, you are going to give yourself fairly full protection. But you shouldn't rely on sunscreens. You should definitely use the shade and clothing to protect yourself.
Right.
I'm curious as to how you were attracted to New Mexico to do this work. I bet it's a good story.
Oh, I just love New Mexico. That's what it is.
Well, that's great.
But we have high rates of skin cancer in New Mexico, so it's a good place
you're
to
kind of in the epicenter of skin cancer here.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
You might as well come to where it's all going on, right?
Yeah, well,
find out how you can help.
Exactly, exactly. So we would like to start doing some skin cancer education, and there's something called Day of the Tread. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
And so we'll have a booth there with some educational materials, and
good.
they've started supporting us. So we're excited about spreading the word.
Treatment for skin cancer has improved dramatically in the past 10 or 20 years.
In the past year.
Just
wow.
the technology and everything going forward is much better.
Right, and then we have some wonderful new breakthroughs in terms of treatment for advanced melanoma, and those include targeted therapies where you target the genetic problem that a person might have, as well as immune factors. So they are working in two different ways, and so we're very excited about that.
Wow. So you can actually track the genetic makeup now.
Oh yes, yes.
Wow.
We can measure the mutation that seems to be responsible for the growth of the melanoma.
That's amazing.
That's fascinating. It
Yeah.
really is.
It was exciting.
Yeah. What was the event now that you mentioned just a moment ago?
Oh, it's called Day of the Tread,
Okay.
October 27th here in Albuquerque.
Good.
Last year I think they had 4,000 participants,
Yeah, it's a
and
huge
people
event.
dress up.
Oh, good.
And you can walk, you can run, you
Sure.
can ride your bike, and it's a great event for Albuquerque.